Oh, we are sitting atop the club, the course itself, set up on the porch of the veranda here, just behind the pro shop here at the Country Club of Jackson. We welcome to the program now Lucien Smith, former chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party. Lucien, good to see you.
Hey, good to be with you, Gerard.
You look like you're ready.
Oh, yeah, this is about as close as I'm ever going to get to being invited on a sports show, is being here with this in the background. So this is great.
It is awesome. The course looks great. We just had Steve Gent on, and everything is good to go. It looks like the leaderboard is setting up for hopefully what will be a very interesting couple of days of golf here. Of course, day one in the books, 3 days of golf left, day two underway right now. The clouds are scheduled to clear out. The sun's going to shine. It's going to get a little cooler but comfortable. I think it's going to be a good deal.
I think so, too. And it's a great event. It's such a great thing that we've got in central Mississippi. And I'd encourage people, you really ought to come out. You know, whether if you like golf, obviously there's nothing better than coming out and being able to watch in person some of the best golfers in the world. But even if you just like being outside, they do a great job. Steve and his team have done a great job of putting together an event that's very family friendly. You know, there's a great little restaurant where they've got cornhole and other games for kids. They've got a little putting green out here, and it really is a fun space. And one of the things that I think so neat about this kind of golf tournament, you know, if you buy a football ticket, if you buy the sort of cheapest tickets you can get, you're going to be up in the nosebleed section, barely able to see the game. Yesterday, I could have reached out and touched some of these PGA golfers you were so close to. Now, if you come, don't reach out and touch them. They'll escort you out. But still, you're right there watching these guys drive and make their approach shot and putt, and it's just a fun thing to come out for.
This just in, these guys are pretty good hitting a golf ball around, aren't they?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. It's fun. It's really fun to watch them because they're just I mean, you don't become a professional golfer by being a bad golfer. These guys are incredible.
It can be a little humbling for those of us who have been playing the game for a long time.
I sat on 9 yesterday and watched a bunch of these guys come up to the 9th green, and there were multiple times where I thought, okay, I've had that shot before, and then they would knock it directly up 4 feet from the hole. And I'd go, well, that's generally not what my second shot looks like. And the only reason I would have been hitting from the same place is because they're 100 yards behind where I normally hit from. So those two things together made that possible.
It's unbelievable. So I know you weren't around here in those days, but in 1979, I was in college, and I remember the great flood of 79, of course, that engulfed the city of Jackson, in particular northeast Jackson, abutting the Pearl. And a lot of folks don't know we're right on the backwater here of the
Absolutely.
Pearl. The course abuts it and is adjacent to it. You can see it on, 15, I think. It's off to your left.
That's right.
And it's beautiful, honestly.
It is.
It's just incredible, all the old cypress and woods around the area. But, I mean, it's the swamp area of the Pearl. But when the Pearl overflowed, that water got pretty high. I remember we used to have a high water mark sign on the tree next to the restroom facility that sits between 3 and 15.
Mm-hmm.
And that sign was about 40 feet up.
Oh, yeah. No, the water came up. And as I appreciate it, and somebody will probably text in and with the real story, but my understanding is when they moved the country club here, the initial idea was that it would be both a yacht and golf club.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because of proximity to the water, and I don't know what exactly happened that caused that not to happen.
1963, I believe.
I think that's
Isn't
right.
that the right? And it used to be where the Shady Oaks Club was the original country club of Jackson.
I knew it had come over. I didn't realize where
Shady
it was.
Oaks on Clinton Boulevard there. Yeah, sure was. And back in those days, they used to actually produce like a directory, a photo directory of the members and their families.
Interesting.
And one of my close friends, his father was a member of it in those days. He lives right across the street here, by the way. And he actually showed me some of those one day from the 60s, and it was just fascinating to look at. You wouldn't do that today. Everybody comes to the club, lines up, and gets a photo taken. We used to do that at my church years ago. And that way you'd have a reference, for everybody.
Well, it's helpful. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but hopefully somebody whose name I can't remember is hearing. I'm terrible with names, but great with faces. And so there's this curse where you'll see somebody and you'll go, I know you. We've spoken before. I know what you do for a living, but I cannot remember your name. And I tell you what, I would love to have a book where I could go back and go, that was Gerard Hibbert.
I totally agree. All right, so along those lines, I got to ask you this question, you being pretty involved in the political realm. when you're running for office, you just encounter gazillions of people, and you want to, and you're shaking hands, and you want so desperately to recall names so that you can address them by their names. Some people are better at that than others. My father was unbelievable at that, but he was a salesperson, and he made it his business to always remember names. So how do they remember? Some are really, really good at that. Some aren't. I always wondered, they got a little speaker in their ear? Somebody said, hey, that's so-and-so. Some aide is telling them that.
So my understanding, Bill Clinton, for all of his faults politically and personally, was just as I appreciate, a total master of that. And my understanding is that what Clinton did is anytime he met you, he would immediately use your name in conversation the whole time. It was, Gerard, it's nice to meet you. Gerard, what are you doing here? And he'd insert the name a bunch, and that had two effects. One, psychologically, all of us have an ego, even if we don't like to admit it, and somebody saying our name makes us happy. But two, by saying Gerard or Lucien or Joe 10 times over the course of the conversation, more often than not, by the end, he had formed this sort of mental connection between your face and that name. So next time he saw you, there was a pretty good chance he could go, Gerard, it's good to see you again. And you're right. That is so – I mean, I've seen the politicians who come up to somebody they hadn't seen in a while, who they met once, and they use their name, and it just has a huge effect. And I remember distinctly watching a politician walk up to somebody and introduce themselves, and the guy said, we've met 10 times. And it was a little bit of a rude response. I assume he wasn't a supporter of that candidate, but it was. Those guys do have to be very careful when they meet people.
That's interesting about Clinton, because it was Dale Carnegie. A couple of things. I took Carnegie management training 40 years ago. Dale Carnegie said the sweetest sound to a person's ears is their name. It's hearing their name. My father, with his 5th grade education, what he taught me, and I'll have to admit I'm not good at it as he was, is that when you shake hands and you introduce yourself and you exchange names with someone, first introductions, he said, you say their name, and then right before you let go, you pull a little closer and said, it was Lucien, right? And so you say it 3 times in that initial introduction, and my father at least attempted to pass that on to me. It's actually a pretty good idea.
It is a great idea, and those are two very similar skill sets.
Exactly.
It's sales. It's just instead of selling a product or a service, you were selling you as the candidate to the people who are deciding who's going to be governor, attorney general, dog catcher, whatever it is.
No doubt. So in marketing, and I'm looking at Alex Payton, our content director here, you're taught over and over again to use the word you. Right. You, right? So like I'm speaking directly to you, and you see that a lot in campaign materials.
Absolutely.
You get the fundraisers when you open up those emails, and it's always, hey, Gerard, you know that we're you this and that. But, all right, so we got a lot of stuff going on out in the country and in the state.
That's the truth.
From a political perspective. Let's talk about the state first. We got a critical governor's race coming up here in, we're just a little over a month.
That's right,
month
just over 30 days. We're almost there.
We're there, and I'm seeing I've seen polls that indicate that the governor has a fairly comfortable lead at about 8 points. I don't think that's any surprise. I think that sort of overlays kind of the political complexion of the state.
I think that's right.
But Brandon Presley seems to be well-funded. He's active. He's out and about. But what I see mostly out of Mr. Presley is not so much focus on policy. And here's what I'm going to do. A little bit. I've mainly seen I'm going to expand Medicaid. I'm going to cut the grocery tax. That's the main thing I've seen. But he seems to focus more on just condemning the governor and trying to really connect the governor to just anything that even remotely looks corrupt. It's Tate Reeves in the middle of that.
Well, the Democrats don't want to have a race about policy. If a race is about what kind of policy you want to see, the Republicans are going to win. I think that's true generally, but it's especially true in Mississippi. If the race is about personality or it's about narrative, that is always good from the Democrats. So you're going to continue to see Presley talk about his childhood, his family, and the more Tate Reeves talks about policy, do you want to have lower taxes? Do you want to have control of where your kids go to school? Or do you want to have your kids indoctrinated by a public school system that tells them they can be whatever gender or they can turn into a cat or whatever happens to be the crazy left-wing thing of the moment? If that's the way it is framed up, Tate Reeves wins.
Well, when you look at the latest, we got a break coming up, but when you look at the latest campaign fundraising event that Brandon Presley's got scheduled. It's kind of a who's who of left-wing weirdos, in my view, that are on that list. So, and the folks that certainly don't align with the conservative viewpoint of how the state ought to be run. We've got Lucien Smith, former chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party. We're in the Element Well studio at the Country Club of Jackson for the Sanderson Farms Championship. So we were talking about the upcoming governor's race, and I may have been a little harsh when I described those who are scheduled to be in attendance at a big fundraiser that the challenger, Brandon Presley, the Democrat, is having. But the fact is, Lucien, and get your take on this, it's hard for a candidate for governor to detach themselves from the national party.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons Democrats have struggled in Mississippi in the last 20 years, because the Democratic Party has gone so far to the left. I mean, if you look at Bill Clinton's platform from 92 or 96, he'd be a Republican now. He'd probably be criticized as some sort of alt-right extremist because of some of the views that he held 30 years ago. And, at the end of the day, we have two coalition parties in this country. I mean, realistically, at any sort of large race, you're going to get elected exclusively if you're a member of the Democratic or Republican Party. And, we converted a lot, when I was chairman, converted a lot of local elected officials from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party by campaigning in their districts and pointing out, that they had chosen to be associated with AOC, with Nancy Pelosi, with Chuck Schumer, with Hillary Clinton, and the extremist leftist policies of the Democratic Party. And so I think you're going to continue to see that in this race between now and November. And Commissioner Presley obviously is trying to position himself as a centrist, but I think what you'll hear over and over and over again is that he is a member of a party that believes this, that believes that. And that's going to weigh him down, because most of the policies that the Democratic Party espouses are contrary to what overwhelming, I'm not talking about 50% plus one. I mean, 60, 70, 80% of Mississippians would reject a lot of the doctrine coming out of the Democratic Party, because it really has become a party now that caters almost exclusively to coastal elites. They get votes in the middle part of the country, but you're starting to see it. And a great example is this stuff going on with the auto workers striking, because Democratic policies, which have aggressively promoted electric vehicles, which is very popular with people in San Francisco and Manhattan, are directly hurting workers in the American heartland that make vehicles that don't currently hew to what's popular on the coast. And so there's I think they've got a very difficult position in the Democratic Party, because they've got these coastal elites that run the party, but their views are just not what most Americans, certainly not what most Mississippians want to see. It's
a good point. I may be a little old-fashioned in this respect, and maybe it's just the bare-knuckled capitalist in me. I don't think it's appropriate for a president or government in general to take a side in what is a conflict between an employer and employees. I just don't get it.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, especially for the President of the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
stand in the picket line.
The head of state for this country. But, it's so much of the Democratic Party, and maybe you can criticize politics generally, but so much of the Democratic Party, and certainly so much of Joe Biden, is just cheap old theatrics.
Yeah.
He's a labor guy, and it's sort of like, I'm going to come work on the picket. I'm going to come stand on the picket line and show what a good union person I am. Now, that said, I'm going to aggressively push an agenda popular in other parts of the country that are going to put you people out of work. But I'm going to come up and show a sign, and we're going to say, look at Joe Biden. He's a roll-up-the-sleeves labor man. And try to cover up what the real policy is. But that goes back to what we were talking about before. The Democrats love narratives, and there's so much. Look, they're better at narratives than Republicans are.
I agree.
They tell wonderful stories, and if it's all about, look at Joe Biden, look at Brandon Presley, look at the hardships they've gone through, look at what their house looks like, look at their this, that, and the other, that goes to that benefit. But if we come back to making the main thing, and talking about how is your life, how do the policies of this administration affect your life, then Republicans are going to win, because Republican policies help people prosper.
Yeah, and the narrative that they try to promote, the Democrats, is the Republicans only want to help rich people, and they want to hurt everybody else. And nothing could be further from the truth.
That's right.
It's actually the polar opposite. It's
Absolutely.
the Democrat policies that are having a bigger impact, negative impact, on the average middle-class, working-class American.
That's right.
Than anything. In fact, the rich people are benefiting from those policies. So that's what's crazy is when they start blasting. Look at all the money that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and others made in the last 2 or 3 years. Well, that's because of your policies. You shut the economy down.
100% right. 100%
You handed that wealth to them, essentially.
Well, and that alliance now much more is. I mean, the people we're talking about who support these crazy left-wing ideologies, like the idea that there are multiple genders and you can switch between them at will, that is a crowd. I mean, those aren't working folks in San Francisco.
Right.
Those are people who are driving out of multi-million-dollar mansions in their chauffeured vehicle to go somewhere. I mean, so there is a coalition between certain parties and ultra-wealthy folks, but it's overwhelmingly a coalition between Democrats and the ultra-wealthy groups on the coast.
No doubt about it. So I don't know if you saw this. Just happened yesterday, I believe, but the Prime Minister of the UK is actually speaking out against this whole gender ideology movement. And he said in a public forum, hey, the country shouldn't be bullied into thinking there are more than two genders. There are only two genders.
Right.
And so we got, essentially the head of state in a major Western nation coming out and saying there's only women and men. He says, and we shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex that they want. They can't. Man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense.
I think that's exactly right, but it's amazing how much the culture has shifted that's a controversial statement. I mean, if 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, somebody had come on SuperTalk and said, look, Gerard, I'm here to remind people that there are only two genders, that men are men and women are women, I think you would sit here in silence going, what's this guy talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, this is such a weird thing for somebody to come on and say. But now the culture shifted where if you choose to believe simple biological truth, you're some sort of extremist, hateful person. And I do think that those of us who believe in that truth have an obligation to believe in the truth, have an obligation to speak up and make that point, because there is such an immense push in the culture, and there's so much punishment for people who are willing to say that. Now, that's not to say every little boy has to play with trucks and want to play football and hunt and fish. I mean, there's room for people to do different things, to be individuals, but the fact of the matter is there is a simple biological truth that Rishi Sunak pointed out. Men are men and women are women, and that's the end of it. Yeah,
no doubt about it. So we're starting to see these sorts of squabbles across the country. We're starting to see victories. I can't remember what state it is, but I saw that a court has ordered that a school district cannot continue its policy of refusing to inform parents when a child in a school starts to express the desire to, say, use the bathroom that doesn't correspond with their biological gender, or they want a new set of pronouns. And the school district had implemented policy that says, hey, teachers, you can protect and essentially provide sanctuary to children in the schools and not inform their parents of these movements and these activities on the part of the child. And this court came down and said, nah, the children actually belong strikingly to the parents, and they need to know this kind of stuff.
And that's terrifying.
I know.
And again, the fact that that's even controversial speaks to what a dangerous ideological movement this is. I mean, if a child shows up and says, I believe that I'm a member of the opposite gender, I want to start using, I'm a biological male, but I want to start using female pronouns, I want to change my name, I'm going to use the girls' bathroom, and it's controversial that the parents should be informed about that.
Bizarre.
It's absolutely bizarre. And I think the fact that this ideology can't hold up on its own is evidenced by things like that. If this is something that has a scientific basis that is you can rationally defend, then parents ought to be aware of it, then people ought to be able to have a conversation about it. But that's not what they do. I mean, they try to crush anybody who opposes their ideology, professionally, personally. It really is sort of a vicious ideology, and you're seeing in other countries that don't have First Amendment protections. I mean, my understanding is there's a father in Canada, and I don't know if he's the only one or if there are multiple people like that, who is literally in Canadian jail for misgendering his child. I mean, that's terrifying stuff. And people, the left does such a good job of saying, look, there's nothing to see here. These are isolated cases. This isn't a big deal, until they've shifted the culture enough that they're able to turn to you and go, well, you're a bigot because you don't believe this truth that we all accept.
It's totally nuts. It's Wisconsin. A Wisconsin court ruled that protecting that information and concealing it from parents when a child is so-called gender dysphoric, that violates parental rights.
It's insane.
Thank God. I'm glad to see that.
It's insane. We don't let these kids drink. We don't let these kids vote.
Crazy.
You wouldn't let these kids buy a pack of cigarettes, but they're able to make these life-altering
bizarro world. We're coming right back with Lucien Smith, former chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party. Stay with us. Jackson for the Sanderson Farms Championship. Once again, if you get a chance, tune into our video. I think you'll enjoy the site. The view, it's great up here, Lucien. We're on the veranda right behind the pro shop, and the background with the course and the tents, the suites and so forth set up. It's really a beautiful view. It's really neat.
If you needed another good reason to watch SuperTalk, this is one. In addition to the great discussion and commentary, you can get a view of the tournament, and it really is. The weather's great. It's not too hot. The cloud cover's keeping it from getting warmer, and every now and again we'll get sort of a burst of cool air coming through. It's almost not quite fall, but we're heading in that direction.
Yeah.
It's absolutely worth coming out. It's a great spot.
Totally agree. Something else is that Brandon Presley, talking about the governor's race, has been putting out communications where he's blasting the governor for failing to agree to debates, but the governor has agreed to a debate.
Yeah,
on November the 1st.
As I appreciate it, he's got one coming up.
November the 1st. So, look, I think that's just part of the political playbook, right? When you challenge your challenger to your opponent to a debate, and the opponent does not accept that, it's pretty common. They're scared, they don't want to debate.
Right.
But the playbook also says, Lucien, you got a lot of experience with this, but when you're leading significantly, you typically don't debate.
Yeah, I mean, I think the governor had to agree to a debate because I think people have an expectation now in a governor's race, in a presidential race. You just I think people just expect that those candidates are going to debate. So I think the governor had to agree to do at least one. That said, it's not his job to create free media for his opponent.
That's true.
It's not Tate Reeves' job to do 5-10 debates to try to help his opponent be on the news as much as possible. So. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of times you see it in primaries in particular and in down-ticket races where people say, I'm just not debating that person at all because I'm beating them by 20 points, and I'm not going to help them increase their name ID.
Yeah, because even if you don't like them, you get their name ID, and what may happen is, you may attract some person that I don't really pay attention to politics. I'm not even going to vote and waste my time. They hear something and says, okay, well, I'm going to go vote, and I'm going to go vote for that person.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I imagine we'll end up with a debate, but I also understand Commissioner Presley's doing this sort of going around the state with an empty chair and
saw that too.
It's which is again good political theatrics, but I think at the end of the day, like I said, if this race is about policy, Tate Reeves is going to win.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, folks, this empty chair play by Commissioner Presley symbolizes Tate not debating, being an empty chair on a debate stage. So, great.
As with most political theatrics, it's happened before. This has been used in other places where somebody truly didn't agree to a debate, and they've gone around and had the empty chair and popped it up everywhere. So there's nothing new under the sun. Something
that has caught my attention, Lucien, is among the Republican candidates for president, none support a pro-life policy if we consider that the standard is that life begins at conception, which I believe has historically been the case among pro-lifers and certainly in the Republican Party.
That's right.
And this has been a little surprising to me. The one that really shocked me, we were talking about it off air, is Mike Pence, who really promotes himself as a deeply religious, convicted person, an evangelical Christian. He has said publicly he supports a federal ban at 15 weeks. That's shocked.
That's extraordinary.
15 weeks. He said it in both debates, by the way. So he's on record. His theory is, well, since the Dobbs case, since the ruling there, which of course allows states, returns the issue to the states, allows the states then to determine how they want to handle the issue of abortion, many of the blue states have been expanding access to abortion and implementing all kinds of other rules that provide protections even for health care workers in a botched abortion if they don't treat the baby to try to keep the baby alive, which is insane. Health care workers stand by and watch the baby die, and they do that with impunity. They're not charged with anything in that case. So we got states putting those laws on the books. We've got Ron DeSantis, who signed off on a 6-week ban in the state of Florida after the Dobbs case. He's now kind of moderated a bit on that of late, by the way. Donald Trump, as soon as that was passed, said that was too harsh. Donald Trump says, quote, we're going to get something done on abortion and everybody's going to like it. So the point I'm making is that we don't seem to have a strict pro-life candidate. And you know this, in the state of Mississippi, that appears on every Republican's bingo card, right?
Absolutely.
It's pro-life.
Absolutely.
Pro-life, pro-Second Amendment.
Every Republican in the state of Mississippi is nominally pro-life. It's a question of what they actually do with it. And I'll tell you, Gerard, I don't disagree with the facts that you're describing, but disagree with those candidates on their position. I mean, life begins at conception. We should not allow people to kill unborn children at any point. Now, we live in a country of 300 million people. We're going to have, through the legislative process, a compromise. And I certainly agree that a 15-week ban is better than these third trimester permissive regimes that you have in liberal states. But where the liberals get us, I mean, they're moving the culture while we sit on the side and watch. We make a grave mistake, I think, when we start with, well, it ought to be a 15-week ban.
Yeah.
Because the Democrats are going to come back and go, well, up until it breathes its first breath, it's abortable, so let's meet in the middle. I think we have to have people I wish we had all of those candidates advocating for a more pro-life position. And I do think there's a nuanced way to say my personal view is life begins at conception and deserves protection, but we have a legislative process in the post-Roe era, and we'll work together to come up with the prohibitions that the broadest coalition support. But the bigger thing on the pro-life side, and this is the reason it's disheartening to hear people like Pence take that position, you know, I want to live in an America where abortion doesn't happen, where abortion is recognized globally as a true evil that shouldn't occur absent a direct threat to the life of the mother. And that's not going to happen just through sloganeering. That's going to happen by changing the hearts and minds of people all across this country. But you are not going to change the hearts and minds unless you have the most prominent members of the conservative movement. And the people who are up on that stage are some of the most prominent members of the conservative movement. Unless you have those people making a case for life, then you're just going to continue to see the culture shift to be more and more permissive, more and more supportive of killing the unborn. And I think that is an awful moral failure of the right.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you see the headline right there.
Absolutely.
He's calling for Mike Pence, all GOP candidates, all Republican candidates for president to back a federal 15-week abortion ban.
I'm not offended by saying I think this is the best we can do.
Yeah.
But I am offended at the notion that should be our starting point in negotiations, or sort of our principle
15 weeks,
on
right.
what the right position is.
Well, I know RFK Jr. has gotten a lot of looks from Republicans and Democrats alike. I mean, right now I think he's still running as a Democrat, but he's certainly teasing he's going independent. I think he will ultimately, but he supports 12 weeks. That's what he supports.
Interesting.
So, and Donald Trump says we're going to get something done and everybody's going to like it, and that the 6-week ban in Florida is too harsh, and he's the front runner of the Republican field.
Well, and I don't think anybody believes or shouldn't believe Donald Trump is a social conservative. Now, I think he has done great work in support of the social conservative movement. I think the justices he appointed to the Supreme Court should give him an awful lot of credit for the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe. But I don't think, notionally, behind closed doors, if you asked him what he thought about abortion, he would be a true conservative on the issue. And so I think that's starting to come out now, and I think he's already sort of pivoting to the general. But we have to, if we're going to eliminate abortion in this country and in the world, we have to have a discussion about why morally abortion is wrong.
Yeah.
And when we start conceding that, well, maybe it is something that people sometimes need for this reason or the other, we've already lost the argument at that point.
We're just kowtowing to the political wins, in my view, when we're doing that.
Absolutely.
Instead of standing on principle. So something else before you go, I want to share with you. A poll found that 32, this is a mayor's poll run last week, a poll found that 32% of Americans want Trump to be president. Again, even if he is convicted of a crime, 67% of Republicans are okay with Donald Trump being president, even if he's convicted of a crime.
Look, I don't think Donald Trump is the best candidate for the Republican Party, because I don't think he's the candidate who's most likely to win in the election last year. But you simply cannot argue with the fact that virtually everyone's life was better when Donald Trump was president.
Yeah.
You didn't have nearly as many people who were putting just enough gas in their car to get to where they had to go for the next few days because they couldn't afford to fill it up. You didn't have people who were worried about whether they could pay groceries in nearly the volume you do now. You've got people are suffering. It's a direct result of Joe Biden's policies.
Yep.
And so I think it's understandable that many people would prefer Donald Trump to be president.
I think you're right. People just, they long for the day. It's a way to put it, I think. That's what they're looking for. So, I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting to watch it play out. I'm sure we'll be talking about it some more. But, Lucien, we appreciate you joining us. Always good to talk to you, sir.
Great to be with you, Gerard.
Yeah, man. Going to have a great tournament. We're coming right back with Philip Carpenter with Century Club Charities. Stay with us. We're at the Sanderson Farms Championship at the Country Club of Jackson.